The dollar is facing a revolt. The world knows it as the king of currencies, but the dominance of the dollar is now under threat. More and more countries are looking for alternatives, and China as yuan is emerging as a clear challenger. Beijing is pursuing a string of deals. The latest one is with Brazil. Brazil and China are ditching the dollar from now on. They use their own currencies for trade. So China is pushing the yuan. What about the Indian rupee? It's not far behind. The Indian rupees also emerging as a serious contender. And why these trends significant? Because currencies drive commerce. The dollar's dominance gives the US an outsized influence on the global economy, and a shift away from the dollar will only hurt America. It will also hasten the rebalancing of the global economy. In the next few minutes we look at this trend, and where this is going fast. The events in Brazil. Brazil announced yesterday, and it did not come out of the blue. The agreement had been in the works for a while. A planet preliminary back to resign, and the month of January, it laid the foundations of the final agreement, and it's a fairly simple deal. Earlier, Brazil and China use the US dollar for trade. Now, they will deal in their native currencies. China will use the yuan and Brazil will use the Brazilian reais. How does it help? It will save costs. Look at the official statement from Brazil. This is what it says. The expectation is that this will reduce costs, promote even greater bilateral trade and facilitate investment. China is breezy as biggest trading partner. Last year, their bilateral trade was worth $150 billion, so it makes sense for Brazil to ditch the dollar with what's in it. Vagina. Beijing is on a mission. It wants to internationalize the yuan. It is building a large coalition of partners. These are countries that will use the yuan instead of the US dollar, and Beijing has made considerable progress in this direction. It has secured bilateral back to 41 countries so far. The total value of these agreements is more than $500 billion, so the yuan is gaining international acceptance, and the petrol yuan is rising. Know what is the better yuan? It's not a different currency. Petrol yuan to simply using the yuan to settle oil bills, just like the petrodollar. And China is making an aggressive push. For this it is finding takers in oil-producing nations. Russia, for instance, it has embraced the yuan, so have it on Venezuela, and some African nations. Now reports, as Saudi Arabia is also considering the switch from the dollar to the yuan, and this is going to be a very important development. We know that Riyadh has been at odds with Washington and is getting closer to Beijing. But ditching the dollar will be a decisive move. Meanwhile, in rupees also competing industrious last day, and as Reserve Bank made a move, it allowed international trade settlements in the Indian rupee. It's still early days, but India has made progress. Banks and 18 countries have shown interest. They've opened special accounts, and these accounts will help them settle trade payments in the Indian rupee. And these other countries we're talking about, the ditching the dollar, they want to use the Indian rupee for trade with India. Earlier this year, Brazil and Argentina floated an idea, are thinking about a common currency for South America. Halfway across the world, Southeast Asia, too, is losing patience with the US dollar. In Africa, countries like any are dumping the dollar. They lose the Kenyan shilling for oil imports. So here's a question: why is all of this happening now? Why is there a global rebellion against the dollar? Also, how did the dollar become the world's reserve currency? It happened after the Second World War. In the 1944, Allied countries met at Bretton Woods. In the US, 44 countries came together. They wanted to avoid another financial turmoil, so they created a system, a set of rules that would shape the global economy as we know it today. It led to the creation of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, also the World Bank. The Allies also agreed to a new exchange rate system. Each country pegged the value of its currency to the US dollar, and that's how the American dollar gained its dominance. The Bretton Woods Conference gave the US image, hence power to dominate the global economy. It created to financial institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, largely controlled by America. And they're still quite powerful and still led by the US. As for the dollar, it is still widely used both inside and outside the US. About $1 trillion notes are in circulation outside America. Some 40% of the US debt is issued in the US dollars, nearly 60% of the global currency reserves are in US dollars, and close to 90% of all foreign exchange trade involves the US dollar. The world economies hoped to the dollar, but now it wants to give up this addiction. But will not happen overnight.